Today, people who are working in nursing homes and living in nursing homes are set to begin getting vaccinated.
It's rolling out in a handful of facilities. We have Fox 61's Keith McGilvery live at the Reservoir Nursing Home in West Hartford with more details on that. Certainly a big relief, I imagine, for a lot of the residents and the healthcare workers in that facility.
Absolutely, Margot and Tim. Good morning to both of you. And new this morning, as you pointed out, we are anticipating the distribution of some of those COVID-19 vaccines here in West Hartford a little bit later on this morning. The governor's team confirming to Fox 61's Zania Maldonado that Connecticut did receive some 30,000 plus doses of that vaccine earlier this week. You saw that as breaking news right here on the morning show. 5 nursing homes up today for the distribution or early distribution of this vaccine. The state not revealing all of the locations as some of those logistics continue to be worked out. But the governor says we all have a role to play in continuing to fight the coronavirus here in the state of Connecticut, especially as we look toward a busy holiday week ahead.
There was a surge, not unexpected, and the surge in and around related to Thanksgiving, in and around those informal social gatherings, and we all paid a price for that. Maybe that's leveling out now. We'll see, but let's not let that happen again. You know, we're a week away from Christmas Eve. We're in the middle of Hanukkah. There's an opportunity for some a lot of social gatherings, and I just really need you to be careful. One, stay within your household and join your friends and family more broadly outside of your immediate household. Do that virtually. It'll make an enormous difference. That's the lowest risk way you can do it. You know, medium risk is, you know, indoor gatherings. Make sure it's well ventilated spaces. Open the windows even though it's cold. Wear the mask if you're with folks who aren't, you know, you're not very close to, not a part of your immediate family cohort. And obviously better to be outside.
Back here at the Reservoir, I want to talk for a moment about how the logistics of all of this will unfold throughout the course of the day today and moving forward. The governor saying that clinics will be set up by the likes of CVS and Walgreens to oversee that administration, to do the work of vaccinating folks. We also are learning that some 86,000 additional doses of the vaccine expected to arrive in the state of Connecticut next week, so they are starting to flow into the state for sure. Also wanted to point out that Fox 61's Matt Caron confirming last night that a second location in Bristol is on that list of places. The Sheridan Woods in Bristol, a second of those 5 nursing homes due to receive that vaccine today. We are anticipating the governor out here at 10 a.m. where we're told that both a staff member or a couple staff members as well as one of these residents will be among the first at this location to roll up their sleeves and get vaccinated. So a lot happening this morning. We will be live with it all. But for now, in West Hartford, I'm Keith McGilvery, Fox 61 News.